So let me make this completely clear. I am not cheersing to Katie and Blake's newfound relationship. I am cheersing to the fact that we have made it all the way through this terrible season. And we had to watch both Katie and Blake settle for their third choice. If that is not the epitome of dating in your 30s in the middle of a pandemic, I don't know what is. Cheers! Hi everyone, my name's Dimitri and welcome back to DimitriTube. The Bachelorette, Katie Thurston, the finale. Let's talk about it. As always, if you're enjoying my reviews, please go ahead and pound that like button, pound that subscribe button, and ring that notification bell. And honestly, I will waste no time. This finale was a train wreck. Let's dive right into it. Right off the jump, it's that time, outfit of the episode. For this week's outfit of the episode, I am giving it to Kaitlyn Bristowe. Kaitlyn is wearing this hot pink, super girly club dress, and she looks like a Barbie doll. I love this dress. And as the audience, we all know this episode is going to be a train wreck, but I really appreciate that Kaitlyn and Tayshia tried to make it more lighthearted and fun with their outfits. And honorable mention goes to Tayshia's earrings. Those were really cute. So the episode starts off with Kaitlyn and Tayshia interviewing Katie. First of all, Katie's hair and makeup looked really good. During this first interview, they really don't talk about much, but Katie does say one thing. Kaitlyn asked Katie how she felt after Greg left. Katie says she felt defeated after two men back-to-back left that she was falling for. So Katie keeps pushing this narrative that she was into Michael, and I do not believe it for 1 second. I still think Michael was really into her, but I don't think she was that into him. But I did have to mention that because it's going to be important later on in the video. So after that, we go into the actual episode. Kaitlyn and Tayshia meet with Blake and Justin to tell them that Greg has left, but Katie is continuing with the show and she's going to continue with the fantasy suites. So in a confessional, Blake says, "This is the week that solidifies if she's my fiance." Now this may sound really harsh, but you know that saying, you gotta test drive the car before you buy it? Blake is very much like, well, if the test drive goes well, I'll make you my fiance. Blake literally just said the fantasy suite is gonna determine if she's the right one for him, and I just cannot. Anyways, we move on to the first one-on-one all-day date, and it's with Blake and Katie. For their date, they play paint water balloons, and they take a dip in the hot tub. Also, Blake looked really good in that shirt. I was feeling the fantasy. So while they're in the hot tub, Katie tells Blake that both Mike and Greg have left. She also tells him that after Greg left, she considered quitting. Okay, so first of all, if I was Blake, I would not want to know all the details of Katie's relationships with her other boyfriends. Next, Katie discussed her feelings with Blake as if she had just friend-zoned him. Katie talked about her other relationships as if there's no chance at all that Blake would have a jealous bone in his body. Like, you know, sometimes in life you want to be honest, but you can't be too honest. This is one of those moments where I think Katie was just a little too honest. Now, I will give Katie a slight pass because it is possible she wanted to tell Blake before he saw it on TV and basically just beat him to the punch. But honestly, I still think she just shared a little too much. And while they're in the hot tub, Katie says this is the hardest thing she's ever done, but she still wants to continue and finish things out. I hated that Katie said that. Katie is talking about this process like she's a second semester senior in college and she's debating on whether or not to finish her degree. She's very much like, I'm gonna continue because I'm so close to the end, so I might as well. Katie's reasoning for continuing on in this process has nothing to do with her connection with Blake and nothing to do with her relationship with Blake. And it left me wondering, girl, do you even like Blake? So Blake after that responds and he just goes along with it and expresses that he's still interested in her. And at this point, I'm just like, Blake, do you just want to f her in the fantasy suite? Is that the only reason you're going along with this? Because that's what it seems like to me. Okay, so now we're moving on to the night portion of the date, and Katie looked completely over it. Blake was pouring his heart out to her, and she looked like she didn't give a f. Also, Blake had this huge monologue, and he didn't even say anything. Y'all know that song by Eminem and Dr. Dre, Forgot About Dre?
Nowadays, everybody wanna talk because they got something to say, but nothing comes out when they move the lips, just a bunch of gibberish and act like they forgot about Dre.
That's literally what I thought of when Blake was talking. If you've never heard the song before, I'll post a link below. So at the end of his monologue, Blake tells Katie, I love you. And for Katie, it's almost like a light bulb switched in her. Her mood and demeanor completely changed after that I love you. And she reciprocates it back and tells Blake that she's in love as well. Now to me, it very much came across like Katie settled. Blake is the last one left, so I'll make this work. And I was surprised that Blake told Katie, I love you, because she literally just said that she was ready to pack her bags a couple days ago. So at first I thought this was the editing, maybe ABC left out parts that we didn't see, but also at the same time, what could Katie or Blake have said further to make this look like they weren't just settling? Like, regardless of what Blake or Katie could have added further to this conversation, I think no matter what, it would have still looked like both of them were settling. Okay, so fast forward to the next day, and Katie is talking to Caitlin Bristowe. Katie is basically bragging to Caitlin about how she got railed out multiple times in the fantasy suite. Now, this was very much Hannah B. windmill vibes.
No, I mean, since it's out there, and, I did say there was something that Peter and I did twice. It was actually 4 times.
Also, this may be a reach, but that could have been seen as borderline spite because Katie knew that Greg would see this. Katie went with Blake to the fantasy suite and now she's bragging about it. And I personally don't think she was being spiteful, but this borderline could have been her being spiteful and kind of bragging about it knowing Greg would see it. I want to know what y'all think. Do you possibly think Katie was being spiteful? Let me know below in the comments. So after that, Katie tells Caitlin that she was talking to Blake, and when she was talking to him, she told him that after Greg left, she essentially wanted to quit. But Blake encouraged her to keep going, and in that moment, she figured it out, and that gave her all the clarity she needed. Now, Caitlin responds and says that is so romantic. No it's not. What is romantic about being Katie's third choice? I'll wait. Like, Caitlin, are you even listening? Do you even care? And lastly, Katie tells Caitlin that her heart belongs to Blake. So it's clear she's gonna break it off with Justin. The fantasy suites during The Bachelor and the fantasy suites during Bachelorette are just two completely different things. On The Bachelor, the men will take all 3 women to the fantasy suite and they do not care. Whereas on The Bachelorette, most of the time the women do not want to take multiple men to the fantasy suite because they don't want to be seen as So this is just a personal opinion. I think Katie should have taken Justin to the fantasy suite. Later on in the finale, Katie argues that she did in fact have a connection with Justin. And at this point, she's already on her 3rd and 4th place men. So I just didn't understand why she didn't just take him to the fantasy suite. I just find it so ironic that Katie is the sex positive bachelorette and yet she only takes one man to the fantasy suites. So ultimately, yeah, Katie's sex positive, but at the end of the day, she's still worried about her image like every other bachelorette. Now we're moving on to the one-on-one with Justin. This one's gonna be quick. So Katie breaks up with Justin. Not surprising. And after that, they immediately cut to Caitlin and Tayshia interviewing Justin about the breakup. During this interview, nothing happened, but they did bring out Katie, and I will say her dress is cute. Not quite outfit of the episode, but it's cute. There is just one thing I do want to point out from this sit down with Katie and Justin. Justin asks Katie if he was just there by default. And he was, but Katie claims he was not. Now, Katie claims that there were a bunch of unseen moments and that they did in fact have a connection. But honestly, I think she just didn't want to look bad and she didn't want to make him look bad either. Because if Justin felt like he was there by default, then he should have brought that up. But at the same time, Justin is a nice guy and he probably saw that Katie was going through a lot and didn't want to add to it. Okay, so next Blake gets a chance to meet Katie's family and he gets to meet Katie's mom and her aunt. Also, sidebar, up to this point, this episode has been so boring. It's clear that the Katie versus Greg is the main event. Before we dive into the meeting of the families, let me just say, if I sound biased in this part regarding the families, I apologize beforehand. So I just have to say this before we get started. If you're new to this channel or you're new to watching this season of The Bachelorette, on a previous episode, Katie tells us that her mom waited over 20 years to tell Katie who her real father is. And not only that, she waited until the the father who raised her passed away to tell her that information. And that is just so toxic. Literally any advice or guidance that Katie's mom gave during this part, I just couldn't take it seriously. And when I was watching the meeting of the families, this was in the back of my head the entire time. Anyways, moving on. So Katie and Blake enter the room with Katie's mom and her aunt. Katie's mom hugs Blake and Katie's aunt just shakes his hand. Literally, from the jump, Katie's aunt is choosing violence. And not only that, Katie excused her behavior. In a confessional, Katie completely casts it off. She says her aunt is not affectionate at all and can come across as cold. To me, that confessional felt like Katie was excusing her aunt's behavior, and her aunt's behavior is not okay, and she shouldn't be excusing it. To all of you out there, if you have a family member who acts like this, do not excuse their behavior and let that family member know that their behavior is not okay. Also, it says a lot about Katie that she decided to bring this aunt over someone else, and we're going to dive into that a little more later. Now, during this family time, we do get to learn a little bit more about Blake. We learn that Blake is unemployed, and he lives in Canada near Niagara Falls, which, by the way, is across the country in another country from where Katie lives. And he's planning to go to Africa soon for a month or two. I said this before on a previous review when Blake first arrived on the season. I knew he was unemployed, and my guess was that he was trying to make reality TV his new job. And honestly, I'm just happy that Blake finally confirmed that for me. Next, this meeting of the families is very traditional for The Bachelor and just goes back to, in general, the traditional rituals of marriage. Basically, the couple is meeting each other's parents and just making sure they all get along and there's no objections before the wedding. Traditionally, when it comes to meeting of the parents, the woman's parents want to make sure that their daughter is taken care of if she in fact decides to marry the guy. Now, Katie's mom and Katie's aunt are bringing this "we're independent women, we don't need a man" type of energy. And Katie, or possibly production, forcing her mom and aunt to do this is weird. Literally, nothing is going to convince them that Blake is good enough because they raised Katie to be independent and she don't need no man. So then after that, Blake goes to talk to Katie's aunt Lindsey one-on-one. During their chat, Katie's aunt says,
"What made you want to go on this season after you flunked out of the last one?"
Yeah, flunked. Yeah, I've been dumped twice. There's 2 bachelorettes that showed up, one left
And neither
within a week.
wanted you?
I guess not.
That was just so savage. And it doesn't end there. She also says, "You ultimately mean nothing. You better be secure AF coming into our family. You're here because we want you here, not because we need you here. Marriage is a lot and it's not what it's cracked up to be." Blake responds, "I've lived through watching my parents it up." And Aunt Lindsey responds to that and says, "That's not the same thing. Watching a train wreck is not the same as being in it." So first of all, let me just say Aunt Lindsey is right. Watching your parents get divorced is not the same as getting divorced yourself. But her telling Blake that watching your parents get divorced is not the same as getting divorced yourself was just so evil. Aunt Lindsey acted almost like Blake made some off-the-wall comparison, like he was comparing apples to oranges. In my opinion, Blake gave a solid answer. By watching his parents get divorced, it made him realize he does not want that for himself and he's gonna make his marriage work. But that was not a good enough answer for Aunt Lindsey. Also, at this point, I'm just thinking, why did Katie even invite this woman? It is starting to make complete sense why Katie acts the way she does. And it's also clear that Katie does not have no girlfriends. I'm pretty sure Katie only has guy friends because honestly, she should have invited one of her girlfriends over inviting Aunt Lindsey, but I'm pretty sure she just doesn't have any girlfriends. And it's possible that Katie has guy friends, but I don't think she could have invited a guy friend because that just would have been kind of weird. If this was the best person that Katie could invite, then that really does say a lot about her. And quick sidebar, this made me really interested in seeing how Michelle interacts with Caitlyn and Tayshia next season because I truly think Katie just does not get along well with other women. And I'm really curious to see if next season the interactions between Michelle and Caitlyn and Tayshia are better than the ones we're seeing between Katie, Caitlyn, and Tayshia this season. Next, Aunt Lindsey asked Blake, when the marriage gets hard, what are you gonna do? So I just did not like that question because Aunt Lindsey was very much placing the full responsibility of the marriage on Blake and like nothing on Katie. So then after that, Aunt Lindsey talks with Katie and one of the questions she asks is, he's gonna go away for a month or two to Africa. How do you see that ending? And Katie responds, I'll go to Canada, I'll go to Africa, I'll go wherever, I'll make it work. And Lindsey responds, Oh, that's very yes, sir. Now, it's clear that Aunt Lindsey is worried that Blake is completely controlling the relationship and Katie's not having a say, but Katie has been doing this all season to all the guys. When Katie was talking to Michael, she was down to move to Ohio to be a stepmom. When she was talking to Andrew, she was down to move to Vienna and support his football career. And now she's talking to her aunt about Blake and she's saying she's down to go to Canada, she's down to go to Africa, she'll do whatever. At this point, we have no clue what Katie wants. So I do want to unpack this and I do want to talk about it. So I think Katie just wants to be engaged and then get married. I think she just wants the title. Katie is 30 years old and me and her are about the same age. And when you hit this age, a lot of people feel like they should be married at this point, especially women. And I think that's how Katie is feeling. Katie chooses her third place guy, so the guy doesn't matter. She doesn't care where she lives. She doesn't care if she has to travel. She doesn't care if she's a stepmom or not. Katie just wants the title of being married, and anything else that she's looking for in a partner comes second. And just one more thing I want to say before we move on. Katie and Blake didn't discuss anything when they were in the fantasy suite. During the fantasy suites, the cameras completely go away and the couple gets time to themselves. And this is literally the most perfect time to talk about your relationship and how you're going to make your lives work once the cameras stop rolling. And it's clear to me that Katie and Blake didn't discuss anything because her mom and aunt are asking about the logistics for once this show ends, and Blake and Katie very much have no answers. Next, Katie and Blake have a one-on-one date and they meet up with an energy healer. They write down their fears and insecurities and they put it in this huge stuffed animal called the Zobra and then they set it on fire. So I thought this date was horrible. It was just way too granola for me. So next we move on to the proposal and I don't like Katie's gown. It's just not good enough. I don't like the shape. I don't like the pattern. But Tayshia's outfit on the other hand was cute. I loved her top. This top actually almost got outfit of the episode. This top was just so edgy and I felt like Tayshia was giving us androgynous tease. The only read I do have is that I didn't really like the back of it. And let me just say, I am loving Tayshia's style this season. During her Bachelorette season, I didn't really like her style that much, but since then she has come a long way and I'm really loving where she's at now. So after that, Blake does in fact end up proposing to Katie. I did think the proposal was sweet, and out of all the guys, I do think Katie and Blake look the best together, but I kind of didn't care about the proposal because honestly, I do not think they're gonna last. ABC was really trying to sell us on this proposal fantasy, but at the end of the day, Blake and Katie were both each other's third choice. So the fact that they both settled very much ruined the romance behind this. Moving on, we finally get to the main event, the Greg interview. And honestly, looking back on it, that 2 hours was pretty boring. ABC was clearly making the selling point of this finale the interview with Greg. And that should not be a surprise to any of you because you know the internet likes messy breakups. Caitlyn and Tayshia are interviewing Greg, and Greg basically buckles down on everything he said during the season. Greg says, "I felt like I was giving her everything and I just wanted some bit back." Caitlyn asks Greg, after hometowns, what did you want in the conversation? Greg responds and says, "I was hoping for us to get back on the same page. There was a clear disconnect and it's hard for her to completely open her heart to me." First of all, this answer was just so vague and Greg kind of dodged the question. Caitlyn specifically asked Greg what he was looking for in their conversation. And Greg just responds, "I was hoping we were gonna get back on the same page." And I'm just like, what does that mean, Greg? When you say, "I want to get back on the same page." We cannot read your mind. If you're saying you want Katie to get back on the same page, like what could she have said or what could she have done to have gotten you back on the same page? And that's what Caitlyn's asking, and Greg is dodging the question. Next, they ask Greg if he would have done anything differently, and Greg buckles down and says he would not have done anything differently. First of all, what an asshole. Second, I totally get why Greg responded like that. This is the after the rose. Katie is engaged to someone else, so Greg pretty much has to buckle down. If he backtracks now, it's just gonna make him look worse. Third, it was so crazy to me that people on Joe Biden's internets was still defending Greg. I get it. Greg thought that Katie was not being real enough for him, but that still does not excuse the way he treated her. Fourth, don't forget to pound that like button. So after that, Caitlyn and Tayshia bring out Katie. and Katie tells Greg that she gave him a ton of validation and that he was only just looking for a way out because he was not ready to be engaged. Greg told Katie that she filled a hole in his heart and he still treated her the way he did. Y'all know I am not a fan of Katie, but I was on Team Katie for this one. She's right. I agree with Katie, and I said this on my last review. Greg was just looking for a way out, and he saw his opportunity and took it. So Greg eventually apologizes and says, I'm sorry you feel that way. And how many times do I have to tell y'all this? That is not an apology. Honestly, at this point, it just seems like Greg is just trying to salvage his opportunity to be the next Bachelor. So when Greg's defending himself, he eventually gives examples of Katie not being real enough. He says, telling my mom I'm a front runner when I'm saying you're the one. You fill the hole in my heart, and then you responded you have a rose. Greg is just using these as excuses. But because of the rules of the show, Katie could not say more than what she did or she would risk revealing production secrets. And Greg knows this, but he won't admit it. Like, it was clear to me that Katie and Greg were teetering on the line of what production will allow them to say and what production will not allow them to say. And Greg was very much trying to use that to his advantage. Katie tells Greg, the second I tell someone they're the one, my journey ends, but my journey was not over. It's clear production was not allowing Katie to end her journey at that point. And keep in mind, Katie ended her season early. So Katie wanted to end her season even earlier than she already did, and I don't think production would allow it. Moving on. So at one point, Katie says that she is happy with her engagement, and it's almost like she was using it as an and one against Greg. As the audience, we all know that Katie chose her third place guy. So when she says she's happy, I'm just like, girl, are you really happy? And just a couple more things I want to say before we wrap up this video. A lot of people on the internet were saying that Katie was very bitter during this finale. Katie's season ended in April, I'm pretty sure, and this finale was filmed recently. So for Katie to be so heated after about 3 months is not a good look. In my opinion, her anger was justified, but for her to still hold on to this much anger so many months down the road was a little wild to me. Next, Katie is never gonna see this man ever again, so she might as well get her feelings out, and I'm a proponent of that. It makes great television. This is your last chance to get out how you really feel, so if you don't do it now, you'll never get the chance. And lastly, the 2 hours leading up to this Greg interview was so boring. The Greg versus Katie was the main event, and they delivered. Imagine if we didn't have this interview and this one-on-one with Katie and Greg. This finale would have been so boring. And that is the end of the episode. Now, before I wrap up this video, I would like to do a toast. So grab your cocktail and pour one with me, or just watch me pour a cocktail. So let me make this completely clear. I am not cheersing to Katie and Blake's newfound relationship. I am cheersing to the fact that we have made it all the way through this terrible season. And we had to watch both Katie and Blake settle for their third choice. If that is not the epitome of dating in your 30s in the middle of a pandemic, I don't know what is. Cheers. Thank you all for watching and joining me on this journey. It was a lot this season, but I do appreciate the support. I'm glad we all pushed through, and I hope to see you all on future videos. Please don't forget to pound that like button, and I will see you all next time. Have a good one. Bye.